Welcome to All In for Estacada Schools. We'll be taking an in-depth look into the work, the data, the wins, and the fun that's happening every day in the Estacada School District. And now, your host, Superintendent Ryan Carpenter.
Hey, welcome to All In for Estacada Schools Live. My name is Ryan Carpenter, and I proudly serve as your superintendent for the Estacada School District. Thank you so much for joining us again today live. It's hard to believe that over 298 people viewed our first All In for Estacada Schools Live on Facebook. What a tremendous victory and a successful opportunity for us to come together and collaborate about some of the hot topic issues that we're all experiencing inside the Estacada School District. And so I just wanted to thank you for being here. If you're live today, I know 4 o'clock is a difficult time, so thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join me as we talk about the big issues inside your school district. But if you're also watching this not live, maybe later this evening or in the morning or in the following weeks, we're just happy that you're here, and we're happy that you are choosing to take an active role inside your school district to make sure it reflects your community's values and offers the best education for Estacada's children. I know many of you watched Super 60 Seconds, that's 60 seconds with the superintendent. Those are just quick hitter, big topics. You're here today because you want to dive deeper in some of the big issues that the Estacada School District is working through and thriving through as we work together as one organization to be successful for our kids and our community. So with that said, let's hit up that question of the day.
What is your favorite Thanksgiving dish?
That's a great question. My favorite Thanksgiving dish. Believe it or not, I am a stuffing person. I love the stuffing as my number one go-to. If I have to go back for seconds at the table, stuffing is where I'm going for. If I'm at your Thanksgiving dinner, stuffing is what I'm judging the most as I am a connoisseur of it, but the stuffing must have gravy on it. So I don't know about you, to each his own, but for me, my favorite part about Thanksgiving is most definitely the stuffing. Hey, I've got a question back for you. So my question of the day to the people who are watching live today, as well as those who might be watching later on throughout this week, is I'd like you in the comments to answer this question. And please do so right now if you're watching live. Where are we doing well? And where can we improve on our response to COVID-19 and our communication of COVID updates and expectations? So I really do want to know, how are we doing? Are we doing a good job when we communicate quarantines, vaccination updates, changes to the Ready Schools, Safe Learners protocols? Or are there areas where we can improve significantly? Remember, the reason for this All In for Estacada's Live on Facebook is so that we can have that great two-way communication. This is how we're going to collect your feedback so that our school district can continue to make adjustments to meet the needs of our community. So please, tell us how we're doing and how can we make those adjustments. Are we doing well, and where can we improve when it comes to COVID-19 response communications? With that said, we've got a lot of hot topics today. Take us away. So hopefully many of you have joined us today because there are some big issues not only the Estacada School District is working through, but also the state of Oregon at large. I'm excited to have an in-depth conversation with our All In for Estacada Schools Facebook watchers today about the approval status of the outdoor mask mandate, vaccinations, a change coming up we anticipate in the quarantining process, and I also want to talk to you just a little bit today about school safety as well. So let's start with the hottest topic of them all, vaccinations for children. My email inbox the last couple of days has been filled with parents who are very much, and rightfully so, concerned about a potential mandatory vaccination requirement for all students who are attending public education. I understand and sympathize with your concerns about a potential mandate in that direction. I'm here to let you know, though, first and foremost, that the Estacada School District supports parent choice in all endeavors of a child's academic experience and personal experience, not to mention the very family values that you're trying to instill in your child. And so I need to say first and foremost that regardless of what the state of Oregon does, or regardless of what we're required to do, it's important for you to know that the Estacada School District believes in parent choice and student choice, and ultimately family freedoms and responsibilities as to what they do with their child. And you need to know that first and foremost, because this is what we stand for. That's the same for masks, and that's the same for required vaccinations for employees to work here. Our school board has done a wonderful job of being clear and kind about our communication of what our school district stands for, and we stand for the choice in the matter and for people to make their own choices. That being said, we are a state-run organization, and so as your school district and as your school district leadership, we are required to follow all laws, regulations, and policies. And you can continue to count on your school district to follow all policies and execute all laws. We don't just get to pick and choose specific laws and policies that we like and follow them, and don't follow the ones that we don't like. You need to be able to trust and rely on me as your superintendent. You need to be able to trust and rely on your school board members that at the end of the day, we're going to faithfully follow and execute all laws and policies. And that's for the benefit of everybody as we try to make a great competitive school district inside the Estacada. That's very important, and I wanted you to know that first and foremost. But back to the required child vaccination or the mandates. I need to let you know that at this point, we do know that vaccines have been approved on an emergency status for all children ages 5 and up to be eligible to receive some form of the vaccine. At this point, that is not a requirement to attend school. I've been working very closely with the state of Oregon, who also works very closely with the governor's office. And at this moment, I believe that there will be no vaccine requirements during this school year. Again, there are many things that could change that. Obviously, we have a new variant that is making a lot of noise out there in the world, and there are different things that could change that. But what I'm hearing right now at the state level is that I do not anticipate that children will be required to get the vaccination in order to continue attending school this year. I wanted to be clear on that because I know a lot of people are very passionately emailing me, trying to inform me that you are very much taking a stand against any type of mandate. I want you to know that I hear you and I am receiving those emails. And at the end of the day, what I'm hearing so far is that no mandate will be required for a child to attend school this year. And so as I try to reply back to the many of you who are communicating that to me, I also want to communicate to the masses that at this point, I don't see that happening this school year. And so I think we can relax a little bit because I don't anticipate that being something contingent upon a child continuing to be here at the school year. So that's what I know about mandatory vaccinations. It's not going to happen this year, subject to change to different factors. Those changes are obviously out of the Estacada School District's control, but I do want you to know that the Estacada School District believes in choice, and we will continue to allow parents to make their own choice on if they want to vaccinate their children or not, and that's where our stance is going to remain. Now let's talk a little bit about the outdoor mask mandate. This is also a pretty popular one, and I think before we go to that though, Maggie, because we want that two-way communication, I want to introduce our communications director, Maggie Kelly, who's closely watching the questions and conversations, and this might be a great time to pause and have a chance to work through some of those vaccination questions. Thank you for putting them in the chat. Maggie, what do we got?
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. Just sorting through the questions here, it looks like a couple of people said in terms of things that we are doing well on our COVID-19 response is cleanliness in our school buildings. So thank you for submitting that, and our operations department appreciates that feedback. One question that we've gotten some feedback that seems to be a bit of a theme is questions about district promotion of vaccines or vaccine clinics or communication promoting those. Superintendent Carpenter, is there anything you'd like to say about that?
Sure. Well, there's several things that could be referring to. I will state, though, to the best of my knowledge, the Estacada School District has not participated in any type of vaccination clinic opportunity, nor have we communicated in a broad scale of any type of event that's going on. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're for or against the vaccination. We just don't believe the school district plays a role in the communication of where those facilities are at or where access can be provided. At the same time, we're focused on teaching and learning and trying to close some of the gaps from the closure of the last pandemic, and that's where the majority of our focus is as we execute this school year. And so the Estacada School District, like I said before, is going to continue to focus on parental choice. That is our official stance. And if there is any evidence that inside the Estacada School District there has been promotion of and or flyers that have been sent out, I'd like to see evidence of that, because I just don't believe that exists. That's not in the core of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I hope that answers some of that question. But I would love some more of response, maybe so I could get more of a specific as to what the question is referring to. But in general, we're trying to stay out of the advocation of or the proselytization or the communication of it. That's a parent's decision, and local public health is in charge of that process. Other questions?
All right, thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. And I will add one clarifier is that we have had one communication from the district addressing a vaccine clinic that was nearby, merely to provide some clarification and address some misinformation and rumors. But as Superintendent Carpenter stated, for the most part, we are just focused on the academics and learning of the district as opposed to communicating about vaccine clinics. Another comment we received from a parent is that they appreciate the COVID-19 dashboard and would like to hear more communication about COVID-19 topics and updates.
Okay, that's great feedback. Thank you. And I'll take that back to the people who are updating that on a regular basis. That dashboard that you're referring to has actually played a leadership role at a national level. There are several school districts throughout Oregon, including Portland Public Schools and other school districts throughout the country that have copied our dashboard as they try to make an effort to be more transparent and open to their community through that process. And I do hope to be able to address, I think what you're referring to, Maggie, is the vaccination clinic that's occurring just the last couple of days. And I do hope to be able to expand on that, because there is a lot of fake news that's being presented on Facebook about that process. So I do hope to get back to that. Please continue to put in the chats your questions. Again, the purpose of this is to go back and forth, and I look forward to trying my best to openly and honestly answer your questions. It's why we're here today, as well as talking about some of the hot topics. So as you take time to fill in some more of those comments and for Maggie to read them out loud to us, here are some changes to the outdoor mask mandate, which is very welcomed here inside our Estacada community. So as you know, mask wearing has been optional in the school settings while outside, as long as 6 feet of distance can be maintained. And so if we couldn't maintain a 6-foot social distancing, then everyone was required to wear masks even while outside. I am pleased to communicate that as of November 23rd, the Oregon Health Authority has changed those requirements, and so mask wearing is no longer required, even if inside that 6-foot circle. Now, for the Estacada School District, for the most part, kids have always had the option and opportunities to wear masks while outside on recess, while outside on PE, while in sports, or even for our parent spectators who have been watching our football and or soccer teams faithfully fully participate outside. Obviously, indoors, masks are still required, and it's going to be that way for a little bit longer, and so we just need to accept and prepare ourselves for that. I don't see the state changing that anytime soon. But that being said, now outdoor activities, masks are now optional and no longer required. So very excited about that change. I wanted to communicate that with you, and Estacada's operational procedures inside these safety guidelines will reflect that as well. So that's good movement. The next thing that you probably saw is also a very hot topic, and things are changing fastly as we speak in terms of how we can execute that. But you probably saw in the Oregonian the week before Thanksgiving break about the state moving the quarantine from 10 days to 7 days with a test to stay option. Now, here's a couple of things I need to clarify about that. Inside our Ready Schools Safe Learners document, we are required to follow the guidance of the Clackamas County local public health officials. And so ultimately, even though, like, let's say Burns, Oregon, and Southeastern Oregon, and Harney County local officials may tell that school district area to quarantine a different way, we're still obligated. The Clackamas County local health is the authority in terms of that decision-making process. And so what you've seen is the whole state give the authorization for local county public healths to make the determination to reduce quarantines from 10 days to 7 days with a test to stay option. And I'll talk about test to stay and 7 days here in a second. And so the state has authorized local public health to be able to make that decision. At this point, Clackamas County has not made that decision yet, and they look at a various model of metrics to help them inform that decision. I am in close contact and at this point meeting frequently with Clackamas County Public Health. We have another meeting this week, and so I do anticipate shortly this change to 7 days happening soon. But at this moment, the Estacada School District, the Canby School District, Westland Wilsonville School District, every school district inside of Clackamas County must continue to work inside the 10-day parameter because we're required to follow the Clackamas County Public Health officials' guidance in terms of quarantine. But that being said, I do anticipate within the next couple of weeks of us moving to that 7-day quarantine with the test to stay option. So here's what this means. If a child is exposed to a positive COVID case at school, inside, while wearing a mask, then the school district is required to quarantine that child for 7 days. 24, I think it's 24 hours, but I think on day 5 or day 6 of that 7-day quarantine, a child can take a specific COVID test. And if they test negative, then they may return back to school on day 8. Obviously, if they test positive, then the process begins again. But I just wanted to communicate that what test to stay looks like is that a child can take a test ultimately to get them to come back to school on day 8. And so there's some logistical issues around that. What it sounds to me like, though, is families can choose to go to a Walgreens or can go to high school pharmacy here in Estacada if they provide tests, Orchid Health on our campus provides tests, and each school site also has COVID tests. And so if your child has been asked to quarantine for 7 days, you do have the opportunities to test your child, and if they test negative, they can return to school on day 8. Now, I think this is a good thing because any fewer days that a child can hit this and get back to school earlier, I think is great. Now, I've received a lot of emails, especially late last spring, about people's strong opinions about not authorizing school personnel to test their child for COVID positivity. Again, because I'm going to stay consistent with the Estacada School District believes in families' choice. That is your choice to authorize the school district if you want us to test your child or not. That's your call to make. All I'm saying is when Clackamas County moves to that 7-day, your child has the opportunity to test to come back to school on day 8. If you choose not to test your child, that's your choice, but your child cannot return until day 11 inside that process. So more changes are coming. I was hoping to just communicate that and clarify that, and I'm hoping now that I've had the opportunity to speak with you about that, you may be able to share that with others. So currently, the Estacada School District is still in a 10-day quarantining protocol. I do anticipate very soon the Estacada School District moving to a 7-day with a test option to come back to schools earlier. I'm going to stop there for just a second before I move to school safety. I'm hoping that more vaccination comments have come in. Maybe there's some questions about the outdoor mask mandate and the quarantining processes. Now, I need to, in full disclosure, I can't see the comments as I'm working with you and trying to work through the hot topics that we're going through. So our communications director, Maggie Kelly, is reviewing those and reporting those in. So Maggie, what is our two-way communication chat looking like so far?
Thanks, Superintendent Carpenter, and thank you everyone that has submitted your questions so far. We have some great questions. So one question we have right now is, if your child is told to quarantine for 7 days after exposure, do their siblings need to quarantine as well?
So no is the answer to that question. The quarantining process only is those who have had direct contact with a positive case. So it doesn't continue to go through the variations of people who are around people who are exposed. It's only direct contact. That question does actually bring up something also very important, though, and it's important to note that this 7 days only applies to an exposure at school with a kid wearing a mask. And so if parents report or Clackamas County Public Health reports that a kid was at a birthday party, and so there was exposure around the birthday party, that 7 days does not apply. That immediately moves to a 10-day quarantine. And the reason why that is because we've been successful in schools at mitigating the spread of the COVID virus. Estacada specifically has been extremely successful in preventing the spread of COVID. Now, we're not perfect. We know we've had a couple, but at the end of the day, if you think about the amount of kids that have been positive versus the amount of kids we've quarantined, we've actually done a pretty effective and successful job. And so the data of our protocols is telling the state that we can successfully conduct school and keep schools open while mitigating the spread of COVID-19. So the reason why I say that is so if a child is exposed in the school setting under all of our health and safety protocols, their ability to come back sooner is available to them. However, if they're at a birthday party or at a sleepover and nobody can guarantee the safety protocols of masking and distancing and cohorting and all the above, it just becomes a 10-day. And so I hope that question, I appreciate that question because I really wanted to address that and I forgot to do that in this conversation. But I hope your original question was answered as well. Other questions, Maggie?
Another question is, are unvaccinated children versus vaccinated children treated differently if they are exposed to COVID-19?
They are not treated differently. In fact, we aim to treat all students the same. We definitely do not want to discriminate based on vaccination status. We do have certified nurses assistants, and what they're doing kind of in the background is regularly they're checking the Oregon Health Authority and some other hospital databases, and we're trying to update because we can see which students who go to Estacada School District have been vaccinated. And so if 2 children are exposed to a positive case, one vaccinated, the other not vaccinated, our protocols aren't that much different. Both parents are notified, and we are required to quarantine the child who is not vaccinated, but we are not required to quarantine a child that is vaccinated. And so I would say the only difference is us sending a child home who's not vaccinated. And again, that's not Estacada's call. That's a law, rule, and protocols that we're required to follow. When it comes to outdoor masking and or indoor masking, every child is treated the same. An unvaccinated child does not have to wear a mask outside if they don't want to. A vaccinated child doesn't have to wear a mask outside if they don't want to. And then again, everyone is still required to wear masks indoors, regardless of vaccination status. So in general, everyone should look, feel, and sound the same inside our school district walls. But how we handle quarantines is obviously different, and that's through rules, procedures, and protocols provided to us by the state. Other questions, Maggie?
One more quick comment, and then I'll let you move forward with additional topics. A good question, and I think this is just from a general stance, not on a specific topic. If a parent would like to see changes occur at the state or county level, how can they advocate for that or make an impactful change? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I do. Obviously, it's difficult to point the finger at where to make the greatest impact in your advocacy. I would, first of all, just urge you to stay focused on the things within your control. I would continue to build a great relationship with your children's teachers, and I would continue to keep your communication lines open as we try our best to make your students ready and prepared for the next grade level and to be competitive post-school. Like, if I were to recommend any spot to spend your energy, it would be staying local and staying acutely attuned to the teaching and learning that's going on inside your child's classroom. Now, when we get to the bigger state level in advocacy, there are just so many agencies and entities attached to each other as we work through this pandemic and or crisis that it's really difficult to just pinpoint one specific spot to advocate for. I would say if you'd like to see the quarantining rules released or relaxed more, I would guide you to Clackamas County Local Public Health. And there's some other spots. There could be more specifics if you want to put them in the chat, and I can kind of help direct you based on those specifics. But at the end of the day, as you can anticipate, going to one place is going to point to another place, and another place is going to point to another place, because at the end of the day, there is a whole governmental structure that's trying to work through this process. And I think understanding that, regardless of if that frustrates you or not, understanding that, I think, is very important. And then trying to, after understanding that, identify where your greatest sphere of influence is. And that's going to be at the local level and working with your school and with your kids as we try to kind of put all of that noise aside and just try our best to educate your child. I appreciate those questions, and please keep them coming. Again, I know that my questions or my answers to questions may not satisfy all. I unfortunately hope I'm not confusing more than I am trying to clarify, but at the end of the day, I'm here. I'm going to be here every 2 weeks. And my point of being able to do this is to be able to discuss some of the hot topics that we're working through, give you the opportunity to ask those questions. I'm going to try my best to answer them. And at the end of the day, I'm hoping that it's through this conversation you'll better understand the tough decisions that we're working through as we go through a school year, and that at the end of the day, we can come together and be one team. Because at the end of the day, all we really want to do is make sure that Estacada's children are receiving a great education and are competitive as they go out into the outside world. And if we can accomplish those two things, then life is good. My final conversation that I want to have today is just a little bit about school safety. I know that some of you have heard, unfortunately and tragically, that there was another school shooting today. And our hearts go out to that community, and our hearts and prayers go out to that school district and the families of those impacted by that tragic event today. That is never easy for anybody, and as a community, our hearts should ache for other communities who have to experience things like that. But it's also a great opportunity for our school district to talk to you about some of our school safety protocols. And these two things, our school safety protocols are vast, complex, and I actually think we're doing pretty well in comparison with other communities of how serious we take school safety and the things that we've invested into that. But it's important to remind people, because I know that police officers are a hot topic issue, and school resource officers are a hot topic issue inside the greater metropolitan area of Oregon. And I just wanted to let our parents and our community members know that the Estacada School District does have a full-time school resource officer who's contracted by the Clackamas County Sheriff's Department. We have a great SRO who's working very hard to build positive relationships with kids. At no time has the Estacada School Board and or our school district have ever wavered on providing this safety and security service to our school district. The Estacada School District will remain steadfast in ensuring that there will always be a uniformed police officer on campus. And the primary purpose, by the way, of that uniformed police officer is to neutralize any specific active shooter threats. That is job number one of that person. And that's why we will never waver in the contracting of that personnel to help support our kids in the time of crisis. But that's a strike of lightning. That's that minimum percent of that opportunity happening. The major majority to have a school resource officer is to build positive relationships between law enforcement and its community and its children. There are so many students who have had adverse interactions with law enforcement or with family members in law enforcement. This is a great opportunity for our school district and our community and our local law enforcement agencies to build those strong bonds and relationships so that we can together build great citizens for the future. And I look forward to continuing in that process. So I just wanted you to know that we do have an SRO. That SRO has no plans to go anywhere, and we're going to continue to provide that service to our children and our community at large. And then lastly, during this winter break, we're going to continue to make some financial investments into our public facilities in the lines of security. At the high school, we've moved away from exterior keys and we've moved to keyless card pads, and so I can use my keypad and I have the ability to get into any building using the keyless pad entry. The cool thing about the pad entry is just with one push of the button, we can secure the whole exterior of Estacada High School in one push. Back when I was the principal there, it used to take us 4.5 minutes to secure the building with every single administrator and teacher going to different doors and locking them manually with keys, which also put our employees in harm's way. I'm so proud of the investment that we made on our own dime, by the way, to improve the security of Estacada High School. During this winter break, the Estacada School Board members have authorized the investment of finalizing that project to every other school building in the district. So effective after spring break, every single exterior door will be run and operated by a card key. So we'll be able to monitor who entered, who exited, and we'll be able to lock things down in an instant. All of the things that are ultimately protecting your child. So these are the hot topics of the Estacada School District, vaccination being number one and no doubt. But again, I hope you'll rest assured that I do not anticipate any type of vaccination reform and or mandate this school year. And so I'm hopeful that will calm some of the people who are very anxious about that. And again, the Estacada School District strongly believes in families being able to make their choices. And we will do all that we can to support family choice through that process. So before we go to fact or fiction, which is my favorite segment, and this is going to be a fun one, trust me, Maggie, are there any other questions that have come in through the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will go ahead and collect a lot of questions at the end of this session, but I'd like to ask some of the ones that pertain specifically to safety, as you just mentioned. One was in regards to safety bullying. What are we doing to prevent bullying in our schools? What are we aware of, and how are we trying to put a stop to that?
Yeah. Well, we're very active in educating not only our children, but our families in bullying as well. And it's a pretty big answer that I'll try to just answer briefly and swiftly because it's a multifaceted approach. First and foremost, at each school building, there are assemblies and education and different type of intentional whole school approaches that are age appropriate from high school level all the way down to elementary level. And so periodically throughout the year, the entire school system is receiving education on how to, just to bluntly say it, how to not bully, as well as how to recognize bullying and what to do when you do identify bullying. And so that happens really throughout the school year. And then individually, each school has a guidance counselor. Really on a weekly basis, our school counselors are educating different groups and classes of people on that process. Again, there are school assemblies in that. And then at the end of the day, there are several different platforms and avenues for students to report bullying if they exist. There's anonymous hotlines through the state police to report bullying. We have avenues and channels. And then again, at the end of the day, it is our hopes that our students have built relationships with their students and they have at least one teacher or adult in a school building where they feel comfortable to come to an adult and report behaviors that may or may not be bullying. And so those are just some of the things that we do inside the school system. There are obviously many bigger forces at play. Does bullying exist? Absolutely it does. And we try to take each case seriously as it comes to us, and we work through that. But I hope that our community also knows that it's not as simple as just to say, stop bullying, right? Like in order for this relationship to improve between one child and another, it requires the whole family. It requires family A's participation in educating the kid and supporting them through the process and providing their kid the tools to be able to work through that. And family B also has to come to the table and support that. And so I do believe when we talk about bullying that it is unfair to put the entire responsibility on the school district. In order for our school district to build a culture of welcoming, acceptance, and supporting all kids who walk into it, it takes an entire community. And so not only are we doing our parts to proactively educate about bullying, as well as doing our procedures, policies, and protocols on how we investigate and assign consequences with bullying, but we also need our parents to educate and support and equip their children at home with the skills and abilities to be able to handle that through that process. And we also need to do a better job of defining bullying. There are many occasions where, a kid may look at another kid weird or differently, and that gets blown up into a gigantic bullying situation when in fact, there was just some different circumstances. And so again, as I try to be just upfront and honest, bullying is a very, very difficult thing to work through because each case and instance is different. And it requires an entire community to work through that process. I hope that helps answer that question. And thank you for asking it. Maggie.
Thank you for answering that question, Superintendent Carpenter. One additional follow-up question on that, and then we do have a couple of other safety-related questions. So in terms of bullying, when that occurs, how is it addressed and what are the accountability measures for the students that did do that bullying? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a policy for hazing, intimidation, harassment, and ultimately bullying. And so when a bullying claim is reported to district administration, there are policies and protocols. And off the top of my head, if you want to look, I'll confirm that, or we'll confirm that in Facebook later, but I believe it's policy JFCF. And inside that policy will tell you kind of the definition of what bullying is for us and how we go through that process. Underneath policy JFCF, if I'm correct, there is a policy JFCF-AR. And if you look at that AR stands for Administrative Regulation. And so that tells you play by play how a vice principal or a principal is to investigate that bullying claim. And so, when a true bullying claim comes to us, the vice principal will print out policy JFCF-AR, and then they'll go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And so each child, in theory, and each situation, we go through the same uniform and routine standards. And there are different legal procedures and protocols that we all have to go through. So at the end of the day, if it is founded that bullying did occur, then there are consequences in each student handbook as to what that looks like. And that's up to including expulsion. It could be out of school suspension and the like. Again, it depends on the variation and how many times the child has been accused and founded of this violation. If it is proven to be unfounded, then all of those parties are also provided communication and information from the vice principal that it is unfounded. And so again, we rely on policy to go through this process. Now I understand that not all and each process is perfect. I also understand that not each parent receives the outcome that they desire. And I think those are things that we need to work through as we work through this process. But at the end of the day, we can all mitigate bullying by trying to build a culture of positivity, respect for all, and an understanding that each child comes to us with different visions, different values, and different understandings. And if we can build that, we can proactively prevent it. Us and our need to follow policy is reactive to things that are and cultures that are already in place. So thank you so much for that question. And that's a good one. Maggie, I think you said you had another one you wanted to ask?
2 more questions related
keep
to
them
safety.
coming.
Thank you. So another one we have is, will we be putting cameras on the outside of our school buildings to monitor our campus?
Yes, and we have several outside cameras already. I won't tell you where they are. I encourage you to come onto campus and take a look for yourself. But for the most part, the majority of our buildings are equipped with several outside cameras. And a lot of those cameras, by the way, have sound as well. And so we do have the ability to monitor things. Now, do we have blind spots? Yes, we do. And we're trying to improve those with every incident that we work through. But I can tell you that even though these things are expensive, and we've been unsuccessful in getting our community to vote in majority in support of investing in their schools for things like this, these are all coming out of our own pocket, the school district's pocket, to create these. And we've done a really effective job at investing in school safety. And the majority of our buildings do have outdoor cameras.
All right, thank you. Our last question on school safety, and then we'll come back and collect the rest of the questions at the end of this session. Can the districts practice active shooter drills more often, and how often are we currently conducting them? The parent believes it's 1 time annually.
Yeah, it's actually more than that. We actually just had not an active shooter, but we had a lockout drill at Estacada High School. Each school building does some form of a lockdown or lockout once every 2 months. So we are practicing these events very much regularly. If you've been in the district for a few years, you'll remember too that we just practiced a huge reunification drill before COVID hit, so before the pandemic. And what we learned from that process was amazing, and not many other school districts have practiced reunification drills, so we do take that seriously. We have, for the most part, stayed away from like true active shooter experiences, where the police department comes in and fires guns in the hallways and that kind of stuff. Although that may be valuable, we also know that that has a tremendous social emotional impact on everyone who's a part of that too. We feel pretty good about our protocols. We routinely do our lockdowns or lockouts so kids do know how to shelter in place. Our teachers do talk with our students about what to do when we're in these lockouts, and the high school just did it today, is why that's fresh on my mind as well. But then every so often, I think you'll be impressed with this too, periodically, every 2 or 3 years, we train our teachers on how to take down potential threats inside our classrooms. And so not only, sadly, this is sad, I'm proud of this because we really do take care of this, but it is sad that we have to train this, is not only can your child's math teacher teach awesome algebra, they can also help in neutralizing a threat as it comes in. And as terrible as I think that is, it's also evidence that we take that seriously, and it's something that all of our employees take seriously as well. So we are working with Clackamas County. In fact, I met with them just a month ago. We believe sometime in the late spring we are going to do an active shooter type thing. It'll probably be more on the weekends, and it's more for law enforcement to get to know the lay of our land and practice their protocols. And we'll probably have volunteer kids and volunteer teachers who want to be a part of that process. I am against, at this point, during a school day, of going through like a true active shooter drill, just because I don't think it accomplishes I think the bad outweighs the good there, if that makes sense. I hope that helps. Maggie, are there any other questions, or should we go to fact or fiction?
One other question related to safety, and then I'll let you move on and we'll collect the rest at the end. How are we explaining lockdown drills to elementary students, since we know it can have a social emotional impact?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes they're wrapped into earthquake drills. They find different ways to do some shake, rattle, and roll type stuff. But it's also a great opportunity for us to talk about strangers. It's a great opportunity for us to just kind of talk about what we do when a serious event happens, and how we come together as a family to support each other. And so you're correct. At the lower levels of elementary schools, really the teachers are just bringing their kids into the classroom, they're locking the door, and then they're going through the rest of their lesson, or that kind of a piece of it. If we have opportunities to educate them about strangers or about bullying, this would be the time to do that as well. And then obviously it's age appropriate, so the older they get, the more honest we have conversations about it, because at the end of the day, we need everybody to be able to be safe, responsible, and respectful of the processes. And so I'm very pleased with our district and what we've done with that. Thank you for all of those tremendous questions, and thank you for this incredible participation. I hope this is meaningful to you. The one I always look forward to, if you were an all-in podcaster, again, we started this with a podcast, and then we've moved this to Facebook Live because we wanted this two-way interaction, which we're receiving today, which is just phenomenal. I'm just blown away by how much you're respecting this process, but asking tough questions, and I hope that I'm providing that. But my favorite part of the podcast was the section we called Fact or Fiction. So here we are on Facebook Live, and of course we all know that Facebook Live has a tendency to be true or false. I'll say that nicely, politely. And so I always loved in our podcast to play the game Fact or Fiction. So let's play the game Fact or Fiction. We're going to read a statement that we heard on Facebook recently, and I will tell you if that's fact or fiction. So take us away. Okay, so the fact or fiction moment that we're going through here, and I don't have it, so Maggie, maybe you can read it off for me, because I can't see it in front of me. Maggie, what is the Facebook post that I need to explain as fact or fiction?
Thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. We have had several reports of staff members participating in, staffing, and leading students to a vaccine clinic that is in the parking lot of Estacada High School outside of Orchid Health Clinic.
Okay, thank you. That's a juicy one, no doubt about it. So I will tell you that a lot of the things that we've seen on Facebook are grossly false, like grossly false. And so if you see some people making accusations about this vaccination clinic, I would be careful with what you're hearing some of these people say. So here is what is true. There is currently this week a vaccination clinic in the upper parking lot near Estacada High School. The Estacada School District has nothing to do with this vaccination clinic. As you'll well know, we have a partner, a third-party organization called Orchid Health. They are a local community public health center and kid health center. And they're a great partner. But ultimately, they have worked with FEMA to provide this week-long vaccination drive-through for Estacada's community. I, by the way, think that's cool, and I'm glad that Orchid Health has taken this chance and opportunity to support the Estacada community members who choose, because we're all about choice, who choose to get vaccinated. And I'm glad that we've found a convenient spot for them so they don't have to drive outside of our community to access this vaccine. What is ridiculously false, and I've received some of these emails where the Estacada School District is accused of teachers taking whole classes over to this vaccination thing to vaccinate kids behind parents' backs, or to just do different things. And I want you to know that just is so untrue. And I hope as you read that, or as you see people who say that you would have a deeper faith and trust with your school district and the people who are a part of that. We would never send a child over to get vaccinated and or participate in that without parent consent. In fact, we would be opposed to a child going over to get vaccinated during the school day because that takes time away from critical learning. And like I told you before, we are first priority in making sure that we are closing as many gaps from this pandemic as much as possible. And our hair is on fire trying to accomplish that. So we are not for anything that would disrupt us from the ability of teaching and learning. And so again, if a parent calls in and excuses their child to do that, that's a parent choice. But like I've been trying to tell you throughout this process, the Estacada School District believes in choice. Because we believe in parent choice, it would be an antithesis for us to be trying to do something like that. And that's just not fair. It's outrageously false. And so if you do see people making posts that we're, marching kids over here to do this, that is grossly false, and you should question their credibility. And I hope that you trust your school district better than that. But if nothing else, I wanted to at least take the moment to address that. That is false. There is a vaccine clinic on our campus currently, and we have nothing to do with that. That's Orchid Health. We're not promoting it. We're not making families aware of it, other than this conversation now. But the irony of me talking about it now is there's people who are literally saying fake news, and so I'm forced to address it. I never would have addressed it unless people went crazy on it. So there's blunt. I apologize for that, but it really is crazy. So with that said, Maggie, this is the conclusion of our All In for podcast. I want to make sure that I'm here for questions. I'm not sure. It looks like it's 4:55. So if you'll stay with us, Maggie, why don't we spend the next 10 minutes answering questions if they're available. And again, if you're not watching this live and have stayed with us the whole time, please look at the chat and please look at these answers, because the purpose of this, again, is to have that great two-way communication so we can be a team and work together as we try to make this school district the best school district it can be for its community. So with that said, Maggie, let's take them on.
All right, thank you you, Superintendent Carpenter. We are excited to dive into these questions now. So we are going to round up the questions that have come in throughout that we have not answered so far. And as Superintendent Carpenter said, I want to encourage anyone that's watching later, still put your questions in the chat. We look forward to answering those, even if it's not in real time later on. So our first question is regarding test to stay. There's a concern if a child already has tested positive for COVID-19, but maybe they already got over it, within 90 days they could still have a false positive. So are they not a part of that test to stay? And I will go ahead and answer this one. The good news about that is if your child has tested positive and recovered from COVID-19 within the past 90 days, they are already not required to quarantine. So they would not need to be a part of that test to stay. Our next question that I'll turn over to Superintendent Carpenter is how does test to stay work and does it apply for school sporting events?
Great question. And by the way, with that last question, Maggie answered that correctly. So great job. But it's also important to note, too, that we'll work with each family individually on each case. And so if there is something that's an anomaly that arises, obviously we'll work with you through that process as we try to make the best decisions while still following the rules through that process. So test to stay. Test to stay regarding athletics is probably the best I can do to answer that. There is still some things changing with athletics, and there's some confusion of school districts in terms of what that means. I'll just be honest. I have heard many school districts say that athletics, because they're also regulated in different ways, that if a child has to quarantine, then they would miss 7 days of athletics. If they test negative, then they could return on day 8. I've also heard interpretations that because the athletes are participating without a mask, that makes them not qualified for that 7-day quarantine, and it's a mandatory 10-day quarantine. So at this point, there's still a lot of confusion out there. I'm hoping this week to get a better understanding of what that means, particularly for OSAA, high school sanctioned events, but middle school will follow those same rules and protocols. So what I can tell you right now is because Clackamas County Public Health has not authorized the 7-day, everything is 10 days across the board, and that's where we'll be. And I'm hopeful, and I will advocate at the state level as your superintendent, that if it does move down to 7 days for Clackamas County, that also pertains to athletes. And I'm hopeful that we'll get to that process. So I hope that that's informative when it comes to athletics. Right now it's 10 days. I'm hopeful it will be 7 days, just like being in school. But I'm still confused on it as well, and I'll just be honest.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. We will also link in the comment section later some more information from Oregon Department of Education on that conversation, just so you can look more into that process, and we'll continue to update you on that as the situation evolves. So thank you for that question. Another question we have that I'll also provide a little additional context on is a parent would like us to explain the thought process behind sending out an email that was titled Kids, Puberty, and Tech, and talked about some sexual education topics in relation to the internet. So some context behind that was one of our elementary schools did send out a link via our SMORE newsletter system with some additional resources for families if they would like to educate themselves on how to keep their children safe on the internet. This was not with an audience of children in mind. If this was to be brought up with children, it would definitely be at a more age-appropriate level. Superintendent Carpenter, would you like to talk at all about our sexual education plan and how we talk about some of these topics with very young children?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question, and I really do think we're probably due as a community and as parents to have a deeper conversation about sexual education and the Estacada School District, because I know that that's a hot topic as well. Thank you for that clarification, Maggie, and she is right. The audience for that communication was to an adult audience, a parental audience, not necessarily to a child audience. And so I'm under the understanding, although I could be wrong, that no children were exposed to this unless families made their children exposed to it, and that's the family's choice to do that. But at the end of the day, what's a tricky situation for us is we know that kids are changing biologically throughout their experience inside our school district as they age to maturity. We know that that's a conversation that needs to be had. And by the way, the Estacada School District believes that that's a family-first responsibility. That's the role of the mother and father or the guardian to have intimate, one-on-one conversations with their child about the changes in their bodies. And they have the opportunity then to reflect and share their own values, morals, and religious perspectives towards that. We support that. In fact, we wish that we didn't have to play a role inside this education. But unfortunately, I hope that you too can understand that not every child has the same successful upbringing, the same successful home life, and the same successful situations as potentially many of the families who are watching this today. And so somebody needs to have that conversation with those children, and that responsibility falls within the public education setting. And I'm not afraid to own that, and I'm not afraid to be a leader in that educational process. Now, I think it's important to note that, sexual education is so politically charged. And yes, we live in a pretty liberal state, being that Oregon, and so its sexual education guidelines lean more towards that. I won't deny that either. I think it's also important to note, though, that every 4 years, the Estacada School District is required to have a local community committee to help us as we develop our own, Estacada's own local comprehensive sexual education program. I was on the committee about 4 years ago, so were many of our local pastors, so were many parents, so were many teachers, and other administrators and stakeholders. And so I can confidently say to you that even though it's a pretty hot topic, and I can't vouch for what other school districts are teaching their children, I can vouch for the fact that we cut a lot of the things that were in the Oregon state requirements to better reflect our community's values. And it's something that we pride ourselves in, and we want to continue to communicate. And at the end of the day, each teacher is responsible for that process, and we support our teachers. We also know that not everything is perfect, and there is some different ways that things are said or shared. But at the end of the day, it is our, meaning yours and my, responsibility to make sure that we're having the right conversations with our kids as they mature into adults. I would much rather prefer that every parent lead that charge with their child. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's where the Estacada School District comes in. That's a longer answer to your question, and by the way, I probably realize that my answer may have enraged different groups of people, and that's not my intention either. We need to have more conversations about this, and I hope that this is just the beginning. Great question. Thank you. Maggie, what's the next one?
Thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. A follow-up on that question is, how do we find out what the sexual education guidelines are and when they will be taught in the classrooms?
That's a good question, and I'll probably need to get back to you of more specifics. As your superintendent, I'm really at the high level of the comprehensive things that we're teaching. The scope and sequence of when that's taught is more at your local building level. And so I can tell you that to learn more about Estacada's comprehensive sexual education plans, you can go to our school district website, and you can find that in our Department of Teaching and Learning. Scott Sullivan is the director of all things curriculum and instruction, including the leadership and development and execution of this comprehensive plan that was developed by our community. And then if you want to know more, this is when I come back to you again. If you've been brave enough to stay with us for the last hour, I talked about where can you make the biggest difference. It's building that relationship with your child's teacher and your child's school. To learn more about the specifics and the timing of when this is, I encourage you to reach out to your school's teacher and or your school's principal to be a part of that conversation. Again, we're a team. This isn't you versus us or us versus you. We want you to talk with us about this. We want your help and support. It's not any other way.
Thank you, Superintendent Carpenter. I will go ahead and link more about our sexual education plan in the comment section later as well. One other thing that's important to know as well when we talk about the timeline of when this is happening during the school year, when schools are getting into the really nitty-gritty lessons about sexual education, there are permission slips that are sent home from those schools as well, and families have the opportunity to opt out on some of those conversations. So that's another opportunity for parent choice to occur. It looks like we are wrapping up our questions at this time, but again, I want to thank everyone for submitting their questions. If we missed any or if any come in later, we look forward to addressing those in the comment section. So thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Superintendent Carpenter, for answering all of those questions.
Okay, hey, we're all in for Estacada Schools. That's why we're here, and there's a lot of hot topics going on. Our mission is to equip all students with the skills necessary to be resourceful and successful. That's our mission statement. We live it, we breathe it, and we come to work every day ready to execute that. Thank you for staying with me today. Thank you for believing in your school district, and I hope that through this conversation, you now can turn around and help us in the communication process of what is fact versus what is fiction. Hey, I'll be here 2 weeks from now. Please tell your friends. Please tell anyone you know. We're here to serve you. We're committed to quality service. Thanks again and have a great week. We'll see you in a couple weeks.